want to greet you again in front of the Institute of European Studies. Today we are continuing, I would say, with the topic of migrations. Last year we had a lecture by Tijana Rečević, and now our guest, Dr. Michal Vit, will talk about the changing dynamics of the EU external borders under the forced migrations. He is a professor at the Department of International Relations and European Studies at the Metropolitan University in Prague. Last year he defended his PhD thesis at the joint program of Maastricht University and University of Leipzig. And in the past he worked for the Institute of European Policy in Berlin, if I'm correct. So I won't be talking longer than this. Please, I give you the words. You can speak between 30 minutes or 45, whatever suits you, and then we will have a Q&A session.
Okay. So thank you very much, and first of all, thank you very much for the organizing this very quickly. And it's my pleasure to speak about the very recent development in the Belgrade, and not from the perspective of the EU, but from the perspective of the country that is affected by the EU development in very significant way. The article or the topic of the discussion, let's say, is based on the article we have published a few weeks back together with Judith Todd from the University of Szeged, dealing with the issue of the experience of the migration crisis on the process of, how to say, defending the external border of the European Union in a way of not leaving aside the very emotional debate about erecting the fences and introducing tough measures, but rather from the perspective of two dimensions. The first is the way how the European Union is able or not able to shape something that is called the European Union as the area of freedom, security and justice, and moving the European institutions from the coordination of the security measures or the internal security of the European Union towards having more competencies when it comes to the Schengen cooperation and being, let's say, responsible for the security and public security of the citizens of the European Union. This is the one dimension. The second dimension is the way how the national authorities of all respective countries reacted, specifically about Hungary and about Slovenia, and to some extent also about Croatia, how they reacted to the 2015 and 2016 development when it comes to the actually leaving aside all the signs of what the sovereignty means in actually even in 21st century to be the countries or the countries responsible for the protecting its territory. And the third point is, and therefore I think it's really important to discuss this not just from the EU perspective but also from outside from the country that is affected by this development. The discussions of the enlarging or extending the cooperation of the Frontex agency as the institution or the agency being responsible for coordination of external border protection within the European Union, and enlarging its mandate to countries Serbia and Macedonia as being not just either EU units being outside the European Union, but also, and this is the very important point from my perspective, it is the way of that the Frontex agency is actually the sign of or is treated as the institution, the agency that represents the rule of law of the European Union, and now being transferred out of the European Union, outside the Union, and what does it mean for the for something that is called still the enlargement process, whatever it means, and the security, and the second dimension, what does it mean actually when the EU agency is responsible for enforcing a law that is not the substance of both Serbian and Macedonian the legal system, which is, from my perspective, very tricky point. So going back to the first dimension, which means, I mean, the problem with the experience of 2015 and 2016, it's not about the member states, it's not about the EU institutions. It's about the member states and their willingness to share and to cooperate within the European Union. It means that the substance of the crisis of 2015, 2016, I mean, every country has its security services that provide accurate information what's going on. I think it's not the secret that the substance of the crisis 2015-16 was expected at least a few years back. At least 2012, 2013, with the rapid increase of in 2014, which means that the EU institutions are about to coordinate the activities of the member states. So as a result of this, the first, let's say, the first point and the most important point, that the situation that is that we can call as a post-crisis development or the lessons learned, is about nothing more, nothing less, the willingness of the member states to share and to cooperate within the European Union under the umbrella of the European Commission that is responsible for gathering of the information, both intelligence and from within the member states, and then giving the mandate to Frontex to enforce the security measures in order to protect the external border. This is the very basic point. Why did to give you some just basic thoughts about how the system works. So at the very top level, there is the understanding of the European Union starting from the Lisbon Treaty, ending with the Lisbon Treaty starting from early 90s. The aim of to create out of the European Union the common legal and in some way the value system within the European Union, which is called, as according to the treaties, the area of freedom, security and justice, which means that step by step it is understood that the more the increased cooperation and the integration will lead to sort of weakening of the national forces or the institutions who are responsible for the law enforcement and for the creating the legal system in order to have more unified legal system and value system within the European Union. Into this framework, the Schengen cooperation is understood as being the part of the area of freedom, security and justice, as the very specific example of the cooperation that deals with the security and willingness of member states to cooperate, because each and every country is still responsible for the security of its citizens, which means that the countries on the external border of the European Union are responsible for the whole European Union, and they can request the assistance or help from the other member states to increase the security measures and to actually to secure the European Union. This is the logic of the current structure of how the legal system of the European Union works. And from this very point, if we can go back to 2015 or 14, 15, 16, nothing of what I just mentioned didn't happen. Hungarians didn't request the European Commission for the assistance, didn't call as the situation of being threat to public policy. Nothing comparable happened in neither Croatia nor Slovenia. All other countries like Austria or Germany, this is of course this measure was not in the place as well. So then, if looking back from the having the experience of past 3 years, past 4 years, we can. I think the very important thing is to ask the question why the migration crisis generated so much emotions, but at the same time that the measures that have been prepared haven't been introduced in the way of cooperation and imposing them on the field. Then, if we look back, what for instance Hungary experienced in let's say almost 4 years, then we see that there is not just Hungary. It is, and I'm not about to just target Hungary as the country who developed its own way of protecting the country. But if we have a look on Hungary, Slovenia, Austria, even Germany, then we can see that the measures introduced, the political one, or erecting or introducing the sometimes really old school, not very sophisticated measures in order to protect the border, have been introduced in more or less way in all in the countries that are that we can call them on the buffer zone between the core of the European Union and the countries outside the European Union, which is in some way quite funny when we consider the whole debate about the protection of the external border, the new measures introduced when it comes to the, for instance, imposing or putting the Frontex in Serbia and Macedonia, which means that of course it's all about politics and it's all about the preferences of the individual players in the European Union. But the most important thing is what we can see from the current perspective, that especially the European Commission, then the Frontex agency, both. Let's speak just about the European Commission. That the European Commission has no power to increase the security measures in a way of forcing for more effectiveness that is connected with the exchange of the information and the cooperation of the forces within the police, intelligence agencies, etc., etc. So the European Commission has no power to force the EU countries to do so. It's just on the willingness of individual countries. So this means that first of all, the blaming of the European Union for not proper coordination, introducing the measures, etc., etc., from the side of within the European Union is simply wrong, because the member states haven't allowed the European Commission to exchange the information and then subsequently push the member states to react as it was expected in past decade. So this is the point number one. The second is, and it is visible the most visible it is happening in Hungary, that we can see, like in we can see in life actually the erosion of everything what is connected with sort of like human rights protection. Starting and I'm now not speaking about individuals as about the pushbacks, etc., and about the discussion, this emotional discussion about what has happened in past 2-3 years. I'm speaking about the on-purpose development or on-purpose aim from the side of the Hungarian authorities to simply ignore the norms of the international law that are connected with the protection of human rights. Saying this, I mean that every country of the European Union is asked, or was asked, and still it is in place, to implement into its legislation something that is called the Schengen Border Code, which means like the standardization of the protection of the external border, which means that in the de jure, it doesn't mean whether you cross the border to the Schengen area from Serbia, from Romania, from Croatia, that every single place the measures are the same when it comes to this, like the security procedures on the border. And this is on the ground a situation that the border guards should speak English and the language of the bordering country, and that they undertook more comparable training, and the most important thing, that the Schengen Border Code, when implemented, is understood as within, like the integral part of the Schengen Border Code is the respect to the human rights and the protection of human rights, meaning that the individuals that request or the claim for asylum, they should be allowed, there should be conditions allowing them to request the asylum within the Schengen country. This is the system is like standardized within all Schengen countries. And what we see in Hungary, especially in Hungary, in other countries is happening in lower level, but Hungary is unfortunately very good in PR, and they are sending the political message to its domestic arena, meaning that Hungary developed step by step developed the system when all the meritum of the Schengen Border Code is simply for Hungarian authorities simply not existing, starting from the way or the process of requesting for the asylum, or the people that are not in a very soft way, they are not allowed to request the asylum in Hungary, starting from this and ending with the way of that there is something something like the border guards, voluntarily trained border guard units are the part of the protection of the external border. So, for instance, they have the right to have a gun, but they are not neither police nor army nor special unit responsible for the protection of the border, which means this is some like quasi, even like we can call it a paramilitary unit that is responsible from the political sense, is responsible for the border protection, but de facto or de jure has very limited power. De facto, the power is when someone has a gun on the border. I mean, this is a clear signal for anyone who is aiming to enter the country, even that is using illegal way how to get to the country. In softer way, it's happening, of course, in Croatia, in Slovenia, in some way also in Austria. So this is like the step by step, the eroding the common sense of the Schengen cooperation under the umbrella of the European Union. And the third point, when it comes to the cooperation or inputting Frontex outside the European or outside the Schengen area, I think it's really dangerous when it comes to the perception of the EU outside the European Union, and also very dangerous for the system of the substance of the cooperation on this very sensitive security issue. I mean, I think everyone here in this room has more or less the idea how the system works. So, and if you put into this system the EU agency, so you have two options. Either the Frontex will be real enforcement of different legal system outside the European Union, either in Serbia or in Macedonia, which means really political and the security challenge for both EU and the non-EU countries. Or you simply say that the Frontex will do the thing that will preserve the things as they are right now. Either the first or the second option is very dangerous for the substance of the cooperation, and of course for the political narration, what the EU integration means, and what are the outputs of the integration process. It is the increased security, I don't know. It is the sort of like political agreement, well, most probably yes. It is the aim of the European institutions to act like that. I'm not convinced about this about that. So then there will be most probably, if it is going to happen, there will be most probably very broad sort of gray zone of political conflicts, but very little legal substance what the actual protection of the EU territory will mean for both EU countries and of course for the integration process as such. Which unfortunately this debate is not very frequently discussed, or this issue is not very frequently discussed, which is very unfortunate, because this is actually the real impact of the cooperation between the non-EU and the EU countries under the umbrella of the EU institution, under the umbrella of the European Commission, but actually without, or maybe most probably without, the significant progress of the integration process, namely in the chapters 23 and 24, which again I think we should pay attention to the process, how it is agreed, how it is implemented, and what will be the results of this the cooperation. Starting from the framework of the human rights and the cooperation and the sense of the human rights in the whole debate. It's getting more and more clear that the member states are simply de facto, when it comes to the de facto cooperation, that the substance of the cooperation based on the respect to the human rights is simply not strong enough to force or to empower the member states for the cooperation in order to secure the European Union when in its terms of protection of the external border, and being the Human Rights Convention being the substance of the legal system of the European Union, framed as the area of freedom, security and justice, as the European Union is developing in its really strategic vision and the goals of the European integration. So I would stop here, and I hope that I provoked some thoughts to be discussed. So please feel free to put the question on the table.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite the audience to ask questions.
Just briefly to clarify actually what was the idea for the others who could come. Actually, Michal sent me an email recently. This was organized in a very fast way. And I got the idea that we should be having QS doing research at the field actually about what Frontex is doing and what are the results, which will probably be published, I think, in some new article and so on. So I asked him that maybe it might be interesting to organize some meeting with the colleagues here and with the people from the civil sector who are also dealing with this issue, and that's how we started to organize all this. And as a pretext, I sent an invitation. We have the article which Michal mentioned, which he wrote about with Judith and so on. So the whole idea was to make such a small seminar internally, starting from the paper, and that's why presentation was, let me say, shorter than generally what we have. But I think that you have put a lot of material and a lot of interesting issues, and we would also be interested to hear what you saw today, I mean, or in the recent days, what is really going on with the Frontex here, because as you mentioned, one of the very interesting things for us is for Serbia and Macedonia that Frontex is operating at our borders, having in mind actually that we are not members of the EU structure and so on. So I first wanted to clarify that, and if you could give us some new, let me say, recent updated things about what you saw here and what is going on, because as far as I know, you just returned from Macedonia. Thank you very much.
I need to, as I slightly touched the point, I mean, you know, the structure thinks much better than I do here. So I think it's, let me answer like that. If there is a legal system enabling to for better cooperation and to force countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Greece to intense the cooperation with the non-EU countries, with the Macedonia, with the Serbia, or to some extent with the Bosnia. So this is like the framework. So if there is a willing political, not even political, if there is a will from within the bordering region for intense the police and investigating cooperation, the illegal migration would be fixed within few months. Since there is nothing like that, and we can start from the very political ones with the until 2015 or until 2016, there was no official cooperation of Greek and the Macedonian police. So either you can perceive as accident or simply the reality, or that this situation has been used as an asset for the whole the crisis. So that, and if you go the border regions per border region, you see that more or less the cooperation is not very strong in all cases. But then, if you impose the EU structures and the EU territory into it within Visegrad region or the cooperation with Romania, I mean, this very simple thing as that the Romania is part of the European Union. Even you can think, that the Romania is not the synonym for country that respects rule of law, but it doesn't matter. That even that the fact that Romania or Bulgaria are the members of the European Union, there exist channels political pressure or the institutional cooperation that force, for instance, the Romanian authorities to cooperate and to execute the border protection. It's the very simple thing. But then when you go outside the EU, then there are frameworks of the police cooperation, and there are examples of the joint operations and the joint investigations. But it's not there is very little political willingness and finding the institutional explanation why the things don't work. And unfortunately, despite the fact that the police units from, for instance, from Austria, Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia are in Serbia, both in Serbia and Macedonia, this hasn't helped the real substance of the cooperation much. So this way of cooperation is more about know-how transfer, learning, showing the both Serbian and Macedonian police forces how the things are organized or together with the equipment, but the meritum is not the substance of the border protection, because from various reasons the political will is very weak in order to increase. It's not about the border protection, it's about the investigation, and this is not the case, of course, not only Serbia or Macedonia, but this is the willingness of the EU countries to undertake this process and to go and to see where the problem starts and when it ends. And in this regard, the Serbia and Macedonia is simply on the way, and unfortunately, the narration of the enlargement process is so weak that it doesn't. There is no match between the political will and the institutional cooperation, which tells a lot about the integration process. But I think for those who see the things if you analyze the things from the macro perspective, this is a clear sign that the integration process is very, very weak in this towards the Western Balkans and Serbia in particular, even Macedonia, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Hi. My name is Mihal Vit. I'm a researcher here at the Institute. I have one question with a quick intro. Over the last few years, I've heard diplomats from Bulgaria, from Croatia, some researchers from Hungary, one simple logic that they don't treat their borders with Serbia as external borders with the EU, of the EU. They treat it politically as the internal borders because of the migrant crisis. And this is where the Frontex, with its expanded extraterritorial mandate outside of the EU, kind of comes in and creeps in the sort of grey area. Bulgarian diplomats spoke about 3 lines of defense against migrants. One is the Turkish border, second is their own interior, where they're conducting investigations, search for traffickers, stuff like that. And they treat Serbian-Bulgarian border as an internal border of the EU de facto. Of course, publicly they're not willing to say that, but they were kind of bitter because Frontex came to Serbia. There were some funds allocated for training of Serbian police, and they did not get sufficient funds to train Bulgarian police for those tasks, even though they are in the EU and Serbia is not. So there were some elements of resentment 2 years ago when I spoke to them. And the diplomats from Zagreb actually spoke that one of the logic why Croatia would like Serbia to join in the EU, having in mind all the complex relations between the countries, is that they don't want to have an external EU borders on their own. Same with Hungary, as I can guess. So do you see internally in the EU that there is this logic that kind of underlies the sort of expansion of Frontex role in the Balkans outside of the EU, and that the necessity of being pragmatic and politically savvy, this is the way, well, not maybe the way forward, but these are things as they stand right now. So the political reconcepting of the external border of the EU now actually Serbia and Macedonia, maybe even Albania, but Serbia and Macedonia for the Balkan route, are de facto parts of the EU political logic in that, through the bilateral contact between Brussels and Belgrade and Berlin. And that now rolls down and creeps into the politics of Frontex. Do you see this logic from within the EU, or is this just a regional thing that kind of made, that kind of created these regional policies for Frontex, for the EU in context of the migrant crisis?
I think there are two lines. The first is that if we start to perceive the cooperation like you have mentioned, then there is a really big threat, because then the concept of the enlargement or the cooperation or the Europeanization of the issue is then empty. And there is an institutional cooperation, but what is inside? There is nothing there. So you can speak about the Schengen border code, but who will enforce this legal system in Serbia and Macedonia? EU institutions. Without the membership, I don't think it is even that we should even speak about this from the political level. Yes, most probably somehow to be honest, it's a bargain, both from some EU politicians towards Serbia and Macedonia. We will put some burden on you. We will promise you some progress in the enlargement process. I think this is the logic behind, and therefore all the starting to discuss something. But it's real. You are right. The migrants are leaving Greece. They are leaving from the EU to the non-EU country, then entering the EU country as well. Again, so de facto, it's happening anyway. From the political perspective, it's like finding a way how to justify the cooperation without membership and without a significant change of the structure of the Frontex. Because if this happens, then this will be only on behalf of when the member states give a mandate to the cooperation. So it is something it can be perceived as something like enlargement process without the substance. From the EU the perspective, like when it comes to the Frontex cooperation and the external border protection, I mean the countries don't trust each other. Hungarians don't trust Austrians and vice versa. No one trusts Romanians. I mean,
not even Romanians trust Romanians.
even, I mean, starting from this, as I said at the beginning, you can't build the cooperation that will be effective. Germans claim that they have increased the number of asylum seekers, that they claim they crossed the Romanian-Hungarian border. This number doesn't fit with the numbers provided by Romanians and by Hungarians. So Hungarians claim that the Germans are creating the tension because they want to sacrifice their own political will in a way of Europe pushing more powers to Frontex, meaning that the Frontex will be the German institution, more or less, in a very simplified way. So upon this, I don't really see the way how the institutions should, how the member states create more trust, the cooperation based on trust and the shared political will. Because, just an example, the biggest problem with the cooperation and the reform of the Schengen and system and the Frontex activity was the elections in Bavaria in September or the early October. And half a year back, the negotiations have been blocked because, for various reasons, Germany didn't want to do any significant move in the way of, because of the elections in Bavaria. And this is very very sad sign of how the cooperation works and how this is completely dominated by the political wills that, as we can see right now, are simply not are very divergent ones. So this is the European Union is and the member EU states are simply moving the problem outside, saying, yeah, well, it will be now the responsibility will be also on the others. It will be out of the focus, and we will sell it as that we are working on the securing of the external border. This will be the unfortunate
Quick
result
follow-up.
of it.
If the EU and EU member states tackle the problem that's head on and be able to sort of own the process, not to put it out, what do you think? What do you believe should be sort of the ideal setup for the next 5 or 10 years regarding this issue? Having in mind that the Balkan route is not that much active as it was 2 or 3 years ago, but that people were kind of creeping and sitting through the fence or Greek islands. So what is the ideal setup? And having in mind EU's interests, internal more or less, and the relations with the Balkan states, with Western Balkan states.
So what is the ideal setup, or is it the wishful reality?
Yes.
Okay, so the ideal setup is that the Frontex will be the law enforcement agency. So they will be out of the particular aims and the goals of the member states, and this will be under the direct responsibility of the DG NEAR, so the part of the European Commission, which means that they will be unified, standardized, without so politically driven motivations when it comes to border protection, regardless the Balkans or the Baltic or south in Spain or Italy. This is from my perspective, this is the only way how to avoid corruption and the trafficking that is happening on still very significant level, and not just I think the Balkans is, when it comes to the number, it's not the most important region right now. So it will be, if this happen, I think if the member states will push for the increasing the competences of Frontex, it will mean that Schengen will not look we will not look as it look like right now. So it will be basically the end of the Schengen system and the Schengen cooperation. So meaning that there will be some countries like Germany, Austria, France, maybe Italy, Benelux countries that will increase the cooperation in some way in exchange for being Frontex, the law enforcement agency, which means that politically it will be very hard to sell, but unfortunately this is the reality. This is the development that I think is, let's say, speak about 5-10 years, which is I would say very probable, and it's connected to this very general thing, since there is no agreement between the member states that the EU should be this common area of freedom, security and justice, meaning this very more or less unified the legal and judiciary system. The countries like Hungary, Poland, even the Czech Republic will not agree with that in foreseeable future. So this will be a very substantial clash within the EU and leading to more differentiated integration from my perspective. But of course, I'm not the person who sees the future.
Thank you.
There are ongoing negotiations on this reform of asylum sector and the issue of immigration in general that are supposed, in my understanding, to be finished or to be somehow concluded at the Sibiu summit, because the Sibiu summit should take up the present situation of reforms in the EU, including immigration. On the other hand, We know all differences, and there is a fact also that some member countries are not even applying EU regulations and EU law, and some of them are at the Court of Justice, I think, brought by Commission. So what's actually, would you expect from this year, from this situation, in view of also the fact that well, some people like Krasted think that immigration is a point when the European project can be finished actually because of such wide differences between our states.
I think what we will experience that together in connection with the European Parliament elections, starting from March, it will be a real mess when it comes to what will be the substance of the election campaign, and also this is a really interesting thing. Since 2 years back, it is almost impossible within the council to conclude or to find an agreement what is the substance of the asylum and the migration policy. It is used as excuse for all member states. It's not about Hungary. It's not about Bulgaria or Romania. It's about shared resistance of all countries involved. So I don't think there will be anything tangible reached by June, and after the European elections, we will be waiting for the new Commission. The new Parliament will be very different to the current one, and then it's the end of the 2019, and the progress will be close to zero. Because no one, everybody is preparing for the election campaign, and I spoke recently with the member of the European Parliament elected on behalf of the Social Democrats, and they are scared to even speak about the migration as the real problem, because they are scared they will be crucified by those who will perceive them as the representatives of as the Germans say, the Willkommenskultur, which is totally crazy. They don't want to speak about like very serious stuff like Frontex, border protection, all these very basic things. You don't want to make them like to fight against the thing. You just want to discuss and to see like what is possible and what is not possible. They are scared to what the election campaign brings, and this is again, once it was the elections in Germany and there was no government in Germany, so everybody was waiting for the government in Germany. Then there was the elections in Bavaria because of the tensions in the German ruling the government coalition. Then there are the elections to the European Parliament, and you can count. You can see what are the very particular political aims and for this very very specific issue. So I don't think that this enforceable future it's possible. I don't. Maybe there will be there will happen something significant that will enable for instance, the European Commission and then Germany and France together to push it through in a way that this will be just as I mentioned, the differentiated integration. So for some EU member states, this will take place. For the countries like the Visegrad countries, they will be out of the system. Unfortunately, the debate and the very sad reality is that even that the Hungary is now aiming to come up with some the ideas that could work. Unfortunately, the position of Hungary is is very bad for many years because of what Viktor Orban did with the fence, with the willingness to resist for any costs. This is very unfortunate that Hungary is now in the position that very little countries are willing to follow the Hungarian policy, which is very unfortunate.
So I want to ask you, the Frontex is still a sort of agency out of the legal order of the European Union?
Well, it's an agency, so it's not an institution.
Yes, it's not institution, and it's not in the legal order of the European Union. You have to know it's a sort of specific agency, and that area that you're speaking is practically area that is covered in the member states by the Ministry of Interior.
Yes.
And in the European Union, you don't have the competence about that.
Yes.
The first problem.
Yeah.
And who will decide how many migrants can enter in the European Union? The second question. Germany decide for themselves. They invite practically 1 million people in Germany, but it's also the territory of the European Union. That's the second problem. I mean, it's not only the problem of the Hungary government. I mean, I'm a little bit critic about Hungary government, about our border with Hungary, because we have so many problems to pass that border, and we're waiting so long at the Hungary border. But I have to. You spoke about a legal framework, but you don't have a European legal framework about real built legal framework about borders, about migrants policy, about it's have to be built, I think.
Well, the problem is, and this is really the really ground touching the problem, because de facto, de jure, you have the EU legal system, you have the area of freedom, security, and justice, but the responsibility for implementing, for instance, the border protection, this is the competence of the member states, and the Schengen Border Code is valid only if it's implemented by individual member states. So, if and there is unfortunately there have been many cases of the Court of Justice that countries like the Netherlands or France or Germany, they are not fulfilling. They have been introducing the internal border without appropriate communication and cooperation with the European Commission, and this was the European Court of Justice decided about some cases that was not according to the Schengen border system. But in some way, in some decisions, the court, in one specific decision, the European Court of Justice said that, actually said that there is no judiciary to decide if the measures are according the Schengen border code or not. So actually that at some point the Court of Justice got scared that if the institution decides about the certain implementation of the Schengen border code, it will be beyond its competencies when it comes to the legal system of the European Union, because in this very field it is still the member states area. So, and again, if for instance, let's just Hungary as an example, not to blame only the Hungarians, let's go at nice Slovenes for instance. If they start to violate, or Hungarians or Slovenes, it doesn't matter, if they start to violate the Schengen border code, so there is no institution or there is no judiciary who can decide that this is against the border code, the Schengen border code or not, because then and this is happening in Hungary. If the Hungarian authorities tailor the legal system according to the current political needs.
The problem is that the European Union is one single market, and I mean, on the level of the Council, they have to decide together how many migrants can enter to have some sort of quota like Americans, you know, or Canadians. But I mean, everybody leads their own politics in that.
Yeah.
Germany, they need some workers. They invite 1 million people, and they didn't ask nobody. After that, Hungarians said, but we will not accept nobody on our territory. I mean, that is the problem. I think if you have one single market, you must have a sort of unified migrants policy.
I recently spoke with one person from the Bavarian Ministry of Interior, and we have been discussing this very issue. And he said, unfortunately, said, I mean, but which is very true. At a certain period of time, the European integration was the shared goal. So the economy was the driving force for the integration, which worked. And therefore, all those additional improvement of the European Union took place. The security dimension is unfortunately not the case. It was not the serious security threat. The migration was not a serious security threat to the European Union and all its member states. Therefore, individual member states perceive the situation very differently. Germans hate Czechs, Poles, Hungarians, Slovaks, whoever, because they don't think that they treat it as a value-based thing. Hungarians hate everybody else because they treat it as the security thing. But both Germans and Hungarians, they treat it in the first place as a political thing, with different political aims. And therefore, also this is the very problematic thing with the Frontex. If the problem is not like shared and real security problem, and instead of this, the political narration is the driving force, then the output will never be good from this perspective. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but 2015, 2016, now 2019 starts. The progress in the Frontex and the cooperation and the coordination of the external border, very, very little. And both legal and de facto, what kind of measures are introduced on the external border. Hungarians are doing, they are showing off with their presence. If you go by car on Friday evening or the evening when the small crossings are closed, this is not the protection of the external border.
Could you just so that Milan Alexic and working in NGO sector for years on migrations as well. If you just use the opportunity to update us a bit on the situation in your own country, in Czech Republic, how many of refugees and migrants have you actually accepted by this quota system, and if something has changed in the public perspective in respect to the integration of refugees, and how is this public policy actually doing?
There are two lines of...
As far as I understood, it's quite negative, right?
There are two lines of development. The first is this, according this voluntarily, whatever, quota, it doesn't work. So this is out of the agenda. But what is constantly under progress and the development is the asylum seekers from Ukraine, Vietnam, Mongolia, and other around the globe. So this is working independently on this huge narration of the anti-immigrant country, which is the development starting from 90s, when the Czech Republic became the final destination for people coming to Europe. And these things are completely the political agenda is absolutely toxic. I mean, you can't if you're the representative of the political party, but from the other side, all political parties that touched or even once expressed themselves that, well, we need to help people that are in need, it's like fabricated in the election campaigns, in the political agenda. It's like super toxic issue, and no one really, and this is also the point, no one wants to speak about the Frontex, the Schengen, all these like big things. This is all these activities are in progress under the radar of the regular activities that have been before the migration crisis. So these are two different things of development, and I don't know. This is also the case of Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The biggest group among asylum seekers are people from Ukraine, which puts this picture into very different and very different perspective, that now we are not treating, if you put at the first place that everybody is equal and everybody has same rights, if you treat Ukrainians as persons eligible to request asylum, and people from Pakistan you don't treat like that, it's a problem. If I answered your...
How many?
I think last year. I think last year it was like less than 1,000 officially.
From where?
I think it was like 300 from Ukraine, and then.
And is there any like stage-one program of integration?
Yeah. This is like they are.
Where do you locate these people?
In sort of, it's called like in the translation is like detention centers. They have more strict regimes than the one-stop centers in Serbia, and they are given after 3 months. They are given the supplementary protection, or they are gained the asylum. So the process hasn't, from that way, the process hasn't been changed on behalf of the development 2015 and 16. The process is all the time the same. Even the numbers from 2015 and 16 were when there was the wave of those people passing Balkans. The numbers who received the protection was really little low. It was like maximum 200 per year, 2015 and 16. So it was really little numbers.
Thank you very much, Rajko Petrovic, research training from this institute. When we speak about migration crisis in the European Union, here we like to speak about problems that have countries here, the Balkans, Greece, Italy, and so on. But I would like to ask you something about significance or importance of Spain in those processes, because there is so little migrants who now decide to go from Turkey to Greece, Serbia, and so on. Italy too, they blocked their position, and in Spain there is no such a resistance to receive those migrants, and we must know that there are not just migrants who came from Middle East. There is too many of them who came from Africa, and there will be more and more in the future. And I'm just interested about your researching, and do you know something more about importance of Spain, because I'm dedicated to Spain in my research. Thank you very much.
First of all, it's, if you compare it with Croatia, 3 years back and now, it's black and white. A country that was very open-minded to the people passing, and now with the current government, it can be turned also, and the same in Italy. It can be really turned up and down very quickly. So as far as I know, when it comes to Spain, unfortunately it is the matter of the main problem in Spain are the fake ID and documents, identification documents that of course generate the problem, and nothing against the Spanish authorities, but we can assume that they are not so. The effectivity of their work is not always 100%, and it is used also because of there is no other options left when it comes to this political narration that is generating this hunt for the migrants, as for instance in Italy or Hungary, Croatia, in many countries, and unfortunately, or simply it's the reality that Spain has the territory on the African continent, so it's like very easy access point to get to the EU territory.
Yes, they have in-class self-claim leader. They are on the African territory, but they belong to Spain and they are part of the European Union.
So therefore, yeah.
And they are for years so big fences with electric shocks or something like that, which blocks those people, because if those people enter there, and it's still Africa, but they literally are in territory of the European Union, and then you have a big problem. There's like thousands of people per day who wants to enter.
So this is a bit similar with the Horgoš-Reske crossing.
Yeah,
the
it's
border.
not only there, you have that in Bulgaria. Bulgaria was the first one who erected that actually. People go there. There were other countries as well. Sorry.
I mean, the point is that despite the fences and despite all these measures, the most frequent place where how the people get to the European Union is the border crossing. And again, in exchange of information, the business with the fake IDs is of course huge, and the demand is really huge, and it's all interconnected. If there is no institutional will to really control the documents, the stamps inside, if there is, and you can just imagine where, for instance, in Algeciras in Spain, if there accidentally two ships from Morocco come into at the same time, you have thousands of people waiting at one border crossing. So we can imagine how in the summer, and all these externalities contribute to the situation that the border guards want to process all the people there. So that sometimes it's used as a vulnerable situation for people get into the European Union, but it's happening everywhere. It's just, I don't think that Spain is somehow exceptional in this regard. But what will be the very interesting thing is whether the financial priorities of the European Union, starting from 2021. There is dedicated a lot of money for the external border protection and the increase of the measures dedicated to Spain and Italy mainly, and to some extent also Greece. This will be really, really interesting to see how these financial resources will be implemented, into what way, and whether it will be not another source of corruption, instead increasing the efficiency of the external border. Because money will not solve the situation. Only the cooperation and the exchange of information will significantly contribute to that.
If there's anybody else, I would just a couple of things which came to my mind, because we made it as an open debate. So I think that first, the information you gave us, that actually services from the, let me say, Western countries we're having information, you mentioned 2012, 2013, about the expectation about the big wave coming. As far as I know, here in 2015, you remember actually that before the big wave coming from Greece came, we had this very interesting and still not really, I don't know, explained experiment with the Migrants movie. You know this? There were like almost, maybe no one knows, 50,000 people, who were by accident, I don't know how, actually, you know, it was January, I think, or
beginning of the year.
beginning of the year, and actually somebody organized that, put those people into buses, and put them through, let me say, Serbia, Kosovo border, because it is tricky in that sense, and then to Hungary. And I don't know what was going on with those people. Some of them returned or somewhere.
It was headed to Germany, as far as I know.
So,
All the buses were going to Germany.
going to Germany after that.
Yeah, they stayed for a couple of months and then came back. Nobody knows because this other crisis erupted.
What I want to say actually that I spoke with some people from services here in Serbia. They were completely stuck with that. Nobody was expecting that. That was chaos for them. And they said, well, we don't have resources to really follow what's going on. The only thing that we could do is really to open the border and to follow where these people are going and to hope that they will continue further. So in that sense, they didn't have information. Again, that people from the West, let me say, didn't share that with people, and I think in that sense that would be fair with the people here, not only about that, but also for the further coming of the people from Turkey, basically, and so on. So I remember also I was in Macedonia, that they were also completely shocked with that. You see that those countries were not prepared, which means that also big Western countries didn't share that with them.
Well, first of all, I'm not saying that they knew, but I think, come on, it has to be so huge security threat that you simply, there is so many people on the move heading to the European Union. So very, very basic logic. If this is happening without the knowledge of the respected institutions, I mean, what is the purpose of those institutions? But with the Albanians, the beginning of 2015, if you look at the numbers from 2014, you will see the increase. I think it was like 2 times higher the numbers of the asylum seekers in Hungary to 2013. So 100% more people have request asylum in Hungary. So which means, well, when the number is double year to year, I think the logical question is why? There was no conflict. I mean, in the Balkans, with the exception of Syria and other countries that are have experienced or simply are failed countries, and people are leaving those places. But focusing on the Balkans, no conflict, no significantly worsened the security and the internal situation of any country. So again, I think this is the very, very logical thing. But if you go back to 2012 and 11, you see then with the when Macedonia, for instance, when Macedonia was given the non-visa regime with the EU, then EU institutions, I guess other EU countries, warned the authorities not about the fake asylum applications mainly in Germany. So again, it has together with the simplifying the travel possibilities and the moving possibilities of people from the Balkans to the European Union. If you look at back in, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years, it's like every piece of this process has its place in the preparation for it's very logical if you look back how it was developing, and of course the situation that no one was prepared. maybe history will show us that how it was.
The second thing actually, I already started, focusing on Hungary as a,
Point of reference.
point of reference, so let me say, and fun terrible concerning actually what was really going on. As I mentioned, the first one who erected the fence in Bulgaria, actually, and they were the first one. I mean, what I want to say, that if you go further around, you will see, I'm glad that Rajko mentioned this in what Spain is doing, but take a look about the Denmark or northern part. There were incredible things. For example, take a look about their law about treatment of immigrants or refugees or asylum seekers, whatever you want. I mean, you know actually that they passed the law, what was it, 2 years ago, I think, that actually when you apply for, let me say, staying or asylum, you have to give your valuables, money and so on, and with that money they intend to finance your staying there and so on. I mean, that's obviously, against any humanitarian law all around. I mean, generally, the point of what Salvini is doing now and so on. So generally, when you take a look at the whole asylum system and immigration law, politics, if it existed ever, has collapsed, more or less. Could we finish with that, I think? And that actually it was left to the particular countries to, let me say, do what they can or they may do at that moment?
Yes, it collapsed because it has, especially the migration policy has never been the policy of the European Union. It was still, and there was this is again referring to the area of freedom, security and justice. It was the wishful thinking to have asylum and the migration policy under the competences of the European Commission. So as a result, there was the aim for having sort of institutionalized asylum policy, but not institutionalized migration policy. And as a result, the EU is blamed for collapsing whatever, but the member states are basically are hiding behind the European Union as saying, well, we want it, but. So in the de facto, yes, it collapsed, and therefore, looking back, the dominance of this political will is much stronger than perception of the security threat to the individual member states that would generate intense cooperation. Since there is no this kind of thinking or the shared vision, then the reality is that we are pushed by this narration, but the substance is, if you look inside, it's rather tragic than anything concrete.
If there's no more questions, I would like to pose a concluding question and we can wrap up this part. Frontex is expanding. We know that they are expanding both bureaucratically, that their office in Warsaw is getting bigger, and that there are serious talks about Frontex creating a paramilitary of 10,000 and more paratroopers with guns. What is the legal future of that, in your opinion, and how does this correlate with both the concrete sovereignty of countries such as Serbia, where Frontex, we don't really know what it is doing and what kind of deals are made by people from the top of our government, and because these processes are not transparent. And how does this correlate with the foreign security policy, and also maybe with the future of NATO and the European army? Because as we can read between the lines from what Macron is saying, is that, in my opinion, what he is essentially really saying is that if the United States pulls out of NATO, this European army will be the successor of the whole NATO's bureaucracy. And the thing is that what I see is the process of transparency, both and state sovereignty, is eroding. And what do you see will be the future? Is there an end goal, or do you think this is just a crisis that is developing, and that the policies are also being made ad hoc as it is developing.
Yes, you are right. In a way that the Frontex is not a paramilitary and is not the substance for the like military improvement of the European Union. It is the if yes, then there will have to be completely new institutional reform of the primary law. This is out of the debate right now. So this is from the long bit, let's say 10-15 years perspective, the situation will be developing into the situation then Frontex will be de facto law enforcement agency with limited, with still under the, together with the cooperation with the member states competencies, but will be developing into the situation that at some point the states like Germany, Austria and the other Western countries tell it works for us good. If you want, join. If you don't want, we will continue without you. Which I think will be the reality, but in a way that there will be no significant policy or institutional improvement. It will be done in the current institutional setting that allows, and the Lisbon Treaty allows that there will be the development of the area for freedom, security and justice to the point that, and maybe it might happen, that the countries like Germany will say, we have reached this level of cooperation and we want to improve, and for that kind of improvement we need the reform of the primary law. And if you want, you can, you are invited, but if you don't want, we will continue without you.
Reinforced cooperation, and you think about that? Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your questions and for your